for October the 8th to order at 4:31. This time I'll go ahead and turn it over to the items of information, Dr. Spence.
We're going to start tonight with a COVID update from Dr. Whitehead and myself.
We did post links here so they would be readily accessible for the information we have related to COVID posted on our webpage. And I believe Chris is going to get those open for us. The first one takes you to a link that gives our daily update, and you can see it's already been posted for today as well, where we post confirmed cases that we've received and the impact that has on students in that school, as well as links on the right that we have some additional pieces that were just direct links that Chris has to open. And this one being one that we reference a great deal. This is our guidance received from the Georgia Department of Public Health, and this is what contains the information that we use to screen students for the need to go home because of symptoms and the return criteria that they have prior to coming back to school safely under this guidance. So just wanted to post those so they would be easily accessible and then see what questions you had.
I know that you guys get a lot of questions from the community, and so, if you have questions at this time, we certainly can answer them. But trust me when I tell you, we're doing everything that we can possibly do to keep kids in school, but we're trying to follow the law and trying to follow the rules the best that we possibly can. I know it's frustrating, but we're doing much better. Our community as a whole is doing much better. And I tend to think that because we're doing so well in the school system, our community is also doing well.
I think that everything that we went through to get to this point, what I suspected or thought where we would be right now, we are not. And we are so much farther than I thought we would be. I think the students are more comfortable. The teachers that I talk to are more comfortable. We get information daily. I mean, I can't see us doing anything more than what we're doing right now for us and the community and the kids that we serve. I think we're doing an excellent job, in my opinion. So.
Our teachers have been at work for 47 days. Our students have been in school for 35 days. And all I heard, was you're going to be shut down by Labor Day. And our teachers have worked very hard to make sure that we've gotten to this point. We're 45% of the way to Christmas break and 20% through the school year. And it's been hard. Our teachers deserve the credit, and our students and our parents deserve the credit because they've done the hard work.
And I would like to add, to kind of piggyback on both those comments, I get the daily statistics from the Department of Public Health for Glynn County specifically. And when we started school on August 20th, our daily new cases per 100,000 was 29.2. As of today, it's 8. So our community transmission rate has definitely gone down, and so we're seeing that similar trend in the schools as well. And so, again, I think it could be, that the impact the school system's had on safely reopening could be contributing to that lower community spread as well.
I know y'all are tracking the data from, our positives and quarantines and direct exposures, and I know you're discussing that with Dr. Davis as part of, continuing with our COVID plans. And I think I've mentioned this before. I just wonder, where do we go from here? I know obviously it's always a changing situation, but at what point does Dr. Davis give us an idea of where we can make changes in our guidelines as far as potentially loosening some of the restrictions?
So we actually did start, and we've maintained a good many restrictions to try to be safe. If you remember, months ago we had this map that showed where we were with community spread. And at that time, the threshold to go to the minimal to moderate spread was 100 cases on the 14-day rolling average per 100,000. And as of today, we're at 125. So if we continue on the trend we're on, we're going to meet that threshold that would have allowed us to operate in the green, in those kinds of areas. So I think we're getting closer and looking at those, but I I truly am continuing conversations with him about looking at our internal data for the numbers of students that we have had to identify as direct exposures who have not gotten ill as a direct exposure at school. Even the cases that we're continuing to see, they're family related in many cases, or, they've been in a social setting with other people. It's not because of that contact at school. And then we're also continuing to get requests to review guidance for band and for chorus and those things. And so I just sent some additional requests to him this week about that. And Mr. Boudreau and Mr. Etheridge play a part in that, because we have to look at what the air exchange rate is in each of those spaces, the square footage, how many people are in the room, how far would they have to be apart to operate safely. So we're still looking at revising those things and allowing, where we can, some, relief.
Right. There's a lot to consider when we're having to make these decisions, but that helps me a little bit with you kind of going back to the measure that we were looking at before, where we thought we were going to be more directed but through a report by the Department of Public Health. So that's good. I would guess our trend is downward too, or are we kind of zigzag in that trend of 14 days of new cases?
Yeah, so our 14-day community transmission index when we started school was 442.8.
It sounds
And
like
at
it's
today,
down.
we're at 125.
Okay.
So, we definitely are seeing that play out. And so, again, I think there becomes some angst in, the chicken or the egg with, are we seeing reduced rates and being able to reduce the number of people that are going out sick at school because we're doing all these mitigation strategies? Or is it something that would have been a trend? If we start relaxing these, are we going to see any kind of increase before we have access to a vaccine? So definitely a lot to weigh out, and we would want to continue to bring that information to you as a board, because I know we've talked about when we would revisit the use of the masks and other restrictions that we have in place. So definitely still continuing to look at all those options.
One more question, an antigen test. Somebody comes back positive, what do we do? I didn't see anything in any written material about it.
So right now, DPH only allows us to use results from a PCR or a specific type of antigen test. And so if it comes back as just an antigen test, then I have to send that forward to Dr. Davis to review to say if it meets the criteria, because the antibody test we're not allowed to use. Because there are too many variables. Some of the antibody tests aren't specific to COVID-19. They would pick up any coronavirus. And so to say you had antibodies from that antibodies test wouldn't necessarily mean you have antibodies to COVID-19. Right. So we've had to be very specific with staying with the PCR tests that have been available. As of the end of last week, Glynn Immediate Care began using the rapid tests. So we've had a number of people that have gone there because particularly if it's a student, they can get their doctor note and results in 15 minutes. There, the health department's continuing same-day appointments as well, and at the latest, about 48 hours return on those results. So, but again, we've had to be, I guess, cautious about looking at any other types of tests, and we send those up for review by the epidemiology team to tell us whether we can accept any other results.
It'll be interesting because the hospital is moving in that direction. So that's going to be a change in what results you're going to be able to be analyzing. So it'll be interesting to see what the backside of that be. We just started that a couple of days ago.
Okay.
So we'll see.
Thank you, Dr. Whitehead.
Yep.
Next, I have Ms. Haywood with an attendance update and cyber PBIS.
Good evening. How are all of you all doing? Good to see you.
Good evening.
So I wanted to give you all an update on where we were with regard to attendance and how we were assisting our students with appropriate behaviors and interactions in a virtual environment. And so a few things that we recognized right off the bat was compassion over compliance, being aware that our children had been out of school for over 150 days and understanding that there were a lot of things that they were having to process with family members being sick and those types of things. And so that was, a lot of that was taken into account when we started thinking about attendance. And so one other thing we recognized was that attendance in the virtual world looks very different than in the brick and mortar. And so we needed to provide some guidelines to our teachers in terms of what would equate for attendance. And then communication with students and parents, making sure we increase that and utilizing all of our methods of communication. And so how do we collect attendance? In order for us to be able to count a student present, we use one or more of the following as a way of doing that: participation in a live online session, direct contact with students, and submission of assignments, and teacher and student interactions. We had asynchronous and synchronous instruction going on, which asynchronous means students and teachers are interacting in a live environment, and synchronous meaning assignments that they may be able to complete and turn in later. And so these were some of the recommendations that we provided for attendance in a synchronous lesson. And one of the key things is the final bullet on that slide of PBIS expectations in a virtual classroom. All of our schools are implementing PBIS, which is Positive Behavior Intervention Systems, and our intervention coordinator, Ms. Yakabachi, worked very closely with our PBS coaches, many of whom are APs, to help them to develop regulations or expectations in a virtual environment. And so I have an example for you. This is a copy of the PBIS Matrix from Goodyear Elementary. And so on here you'll see where teachers work with students in their respecting, responsible, and role models, and what it looked like in each of these different scenarios. So when students enter class, when a class is being led by a teacher, when there's one-on-one instruction, as well as when there were group assignments. And so, again, we recognize these were things that we weren't necessarily prepared for coming out. And so we had to think about, how do these things look in a virtual environment? What does respect look like in a virtual classroom compared to what it would look like in a face-to-face classroom? So we want to make sure that our students knew what the expectations were and that we could continue to model those positive behaviors even with a virtual environment. So we saw we had about 20% of our overall student population that was participating in school virtually. And so we thought it would be helpful for you to kind of have those numbers, and we did it based by schools. But the green numbers are the number of actual face-to-face students, and the bluish, grayish numbers are the students who were enrolled virtually. And this was from August 20th through September the 25th, which was the end of the first grading period for our students. And then we wanted to look at what did our attendance look like virtually compared to those that were face-to-face. And the green numbers are our face-to-face students, and the lightish gray numbers are our virtual students. And one of the things that we recognized was that students who had chronic attendance from face-to-face were having issues coming to school virtually as well. And then our middle school numbers. And these are the number of students from 0 days that had perfect attendance, for kids that missed 1 to 5, kids that missed 6 to 9, and then those that missed 10 or more. That's our high school numbers. And things that we had to consider when we started thinking about online attendance. These are some of the trends that were coming to our attention, is that we had a lot of students that had unstable internet connectivity. And so when that happens, teachers would make communication with those students and with those parents to make sure that those kids were able to get their assignments. And one of the things that Dr. Spence has had our teachers do, which we think has been very impactful, is making sure that the assignments were available online. So even if they weren't able to maybe participate in the asynchronous instruction, they still were able to get access to content from that day, the recordings of the lessons and all of those things. Caring for family members are things that we've learned as well. And again, having that flexibility with having access to instruction was important. We also recognized that we had some students that were having to care for siblings, and then we had some that also got jobs. From March to May, they were able to get jobs, and so that may have had an impact on their ability to participate online. And so, again, our teachers were working really hard to make sure that students still were getting that instruction and being accessible. So we just felt it was important to give you guys an update of where we were, particularly since we're going now into the second grading period, so that you knew that we were monitoring and keeping up with our students. And we've been very intentional in being preventative versus reactive, in making sure we're reaching out to those parents and those students who may have had problems with attendance prior to COVID, and making sure that they stay engaged and that we're following up to make sure that they have what they need.
Any questions for Ms. Haywood?
I don't know if it's to Ms. Haywood, but I'm sure y'all could come up with. I was just wondering about if we went through the first grading period through the elementary school, do we see a correlation, or do we have enough information to know how the virtual situation has affected them as opposed to the kids that are face-to-face?
The vast majority of our failures are virtual students. And when I say vast, I mean 80%. So maybe even higher. We're also seeing something else that I just kind of caught on to because I was looking at some data. We have more students who are 11th and 12th graders right now who have not come back than we have in the past 8 or 10 years since I became principal at Glynn Academy, because a lot of them got jobs in March and April, full-time jobs, and they're making money, and we're trying our best to get them back to school, but it's been very hard. And that number is much higher than it was 6 or 7 years ago.
So are we considering those dropouts, or are they just...
They would be a dropout if we can't get them back to school. And see, that used to be a problem, but we would have them in school and we could keep them moving through the process, and so they might get a job, but it wouldn't be, you know, maybe a couple months and they come back to school. But you got to think about it. They were out of school March, April, May, June, you know, July. That's a long time, and they were working a full-time job, and so we're having to go to their house and say, hey, come on back to school, and it's tough. And so we're dealing with it. We're just going to have to deal with it the best way we can. And these are kids that have passed their classes too, that could graduate.
And there are children that aren't showing up in person and are not participating in virtual too.
There's
just no...
We have about almost 500 kids that we think should be in our school that are not in our school. They've moved to homeschool, they've moved to private school, or we just simply can't find them. And we have been looking for them for 4 or 5 weeks now. So our enrollment numbers are down around 12,800 as opposed to 13,100, rough to give or take. And so we'll just keep looking. There's a lot of that might be kindergartners who we thought were coming who just decided not to come.
Do we have a vast majority of those ones that were, you said 80% of the failing were virtual? Are they coming back to face-to-face, or did they stay?
Some of them, many of them did, but there are some that did not. But many of them did, yes. And we're still trying to get them to come. So, at the semester break, we're not. I just can't allow them to keep failing like that and be out of school. We're going to have to bring them back, and we're not going to. For some people, we're just not going to allow them to have the virtual option if they're not even going to do anything.
Well, that was my next question. I'm sorry if I missed it earlier, but you know, the only solution I see is to cut out virtual, and I don't think you can say virtual is available to you but not to you. It's going to have to be, we're going back to regular school with a mask on, but if you're not here, you know, you're going to do like we always did, go back to regular truancy and all the kind of stuff we had.
Well, we can hold them truant virtually also right now.
Yes.
We're talking with the
but I mean,
judges
you know,
right now.
you can't file 500, you know what I mean? So, I
Right.
mean, if they know that they're supposed to be back in school, you know, every morning, maybe that'll help, I don't know.
Right. Well, that's going to be a battle we're going to have to talk about.
Yeah.
So, any other questions for Ms. Haywood?
Thank you, Ms. Evans.
Thank you. Thank you all
I
so
just
much.
had a question about what you had said, Dr. Spence, that you gave the example of, you know, they've gotten jobs, or
Right.
maybe we expected them in kindergarten. So are we seeing a large portion of that 500 be on the opposite
Oh, no.
end of the spectrum,
The one-
or it's
Yeah, the ones who have gotten jobs, we know who they are because we know them, we know where they're at, and we've gone to their house and said, hey, it's time to come back to school. I mean, just the other day, I was looking at Brunswick House roster. There's an 11th grade student who has never failed a class, who's now 16 years old, and he's got a job. And he doesn't want to come back to school, and his mom doesn't want it. And so I've talked to his mom. I've sent the teacher out there to talk to the mom, and he just will not come back to school. That hasn't happened in a long time because we had gotten around at high school and keeping him in school. But when you miss 5 months of school and a kid gets a job, that's hard now.
Right. But we're seeing a similar thing, though, in established elementary students and middle school students, too, where they don't have the opportunity to have a job. We're still
Right.
seeing that same
There are some
situation
students out there
they're
that
gone.
just have not come back to school, yes, and we can't find them.
We've had some parents that have called that were concerned about sending their children to school because they're caring for ailing parents and other situations, and so we've worked with them to get, well, if you don't want to bring your child to school, we've got a virtual option. So and then we've had some people that thought that they applied for our virtual school that actually applied for homeschool, not realizing that they completed the wrong application. So we've been working feverishly. I mean, when I say all hands on deck, Dr. Spence is absolutely right. We've done everything we can to find every kid we can find.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Does
Thank you all.
hospital homebound extend to you if, you know, if it's not the student that's homebound, that's hospitalized, if there's family members or grandparents or parents who can't take care of getting them to school, do those benefits
It's
transfer?
my understanding they're talking
if-
about hospital homebound. I think it has to do with just the student being
Just the
ill.
student, okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
Yes.
Next is Dr. Whitehead and Ms. Lewis talking about the diagnostic assessments that we've been given.
So just want to give you an update. You approved, you know, toward the end of summer, the purchase of the licenses for IXL for us to use as a math diagnostic and to have those resources available to our schools. And we've both been out and as well as Dr. Spence out talking with principals about the use of those, what the results are looking like. And so just wanted to share with you the layout of how that's looked with the administration of IXL for math has happened twice, so that we did that to see what students were coming back to school with and then giving them some instructional time. And then we've just finished on Monday administering a second round to see what kind of recovery we've had there. We started the year with our Achieve level set in grades 3 through 8 to get a Lexile measure for them for that informational text. Elementary's been administering running records in addition to that. And on Monday, we closed the window for the reading inventory, which we gave across the system to see where our students are with their Lexiles at this point in time. So that second window is closing. It's been timely with bringing students back into the building and identifying the individual needs for students, and instructional planning purposes have been accomplished with that. I will say, to piggyback on the conversations about the attendance with the virtual students, our biggest challenge so far has been getting our virtual students to complete those assessments. So we're still working through that with many of our virtual families to make them aware of the importance of completing those assessments and that the students are completing those assessments independently. So Ms. Lewis is going to talk a little bit about what they're now doing with that data.
So hi, I feel like I've seen y'all forever. So as the data is coming in, we are using our data for three different lenses. One is through this child's lens. We'll actually see where the child is, a snapshot in time. Whether how further behind are they anywhere near where they need to be? But also it lets us know that maybe we need to look at trend, because it might be that Jerry all of a sudden has not showing any lack of Lexile scores or the math. Maybe he's doing great. Is this a phenomenon or is it normal? So we can look at trend data for Jerry as well to make sure we're looking at the true picture. The second lens that we look through is through teacher's lens. And that means when she was talking about the running record, that is a teacher given versus the reading inventory, which is computer based. So we can help teachers look and say, this was given by a teacher. We know there's some subjectivity to it. So we're going to compare the data to the other pieces that we have to make sure we're looking at the true picture of a child. The other part of that will also be, how can we differentiate? We talked about tier 1 and tier 2 in the past. Well, our tier 1 may look very different. If you have a class of 25 kids, and if you have 21 children that are 2 levels behind, that is your tier 1 there, because you can't put 21 children in tier 2. So that allows us to help our teachers with resources to say, how do we differentiate? And one of the extra beauties that we're tapping into now is because of the videos, we can actually have access videos to grade level below us, 2 grade levels below us, for videos to help. If parents want to say, how do I help my kid? Well, we have access to those videos now, which is a great treasure. The third lens that we look through with the diagnostic data that we have is through our PL department. So once we see where the children are at their levels, then we see what the teachers are doing with it and how they differentiate and plan their lessons. Then the district office takes that data and say, now what do you need from us for our professional learning? Do you need professional learning in the curriculum area? Do you need professional learning in delivery and instruction model? Do you need PL and data analysis with the data that we get? So that gives us 3 different ways to help our children learn and be successful in school. Any questions?
Yeah, so I've got a question.
Sure.
Maybe just comments/questions. And Dr. Spence, you and I and Edie have had a text conversation about this, but I know a lot of times whenever we start something new, and I'm not sure if the situation we talked about was an online thing or if it was a written test. Do you know the math test that we were talking about?
I think it might have been online.
Okay, so we're talking about an accelerated math class at Glynn Middle School, and the kids are expecting a test to be on Friday, and then Tuesday night the teacher says, okay, it's going to be Wednesday. And it's online, and I assume it's through this new system, and the highest grade is a low B, and you're talking about accelerated kids who have traditionally done well. So, I know this happens every time we do this, but it's frustrating for teachers, it's frustrating for parents, it's frustrating for students. So how do you not hold a student harmless? Or how do for stuff being sprung on? There's things 30% of the test that they haven't covered. Who's watching that particular test? I know that y'all do curriculum for the system, but who is looking at that test saying, this teacher has not covered this data? Why are we testing on it? And so I think there's a disconnect. And listen, I'm talking about one example, but I got to believe it's, I don't know if it's widespread, but it's got to happen anytime we have a new system. So I'm talking math, of course. So who's in charge of looking at that to make sure that you're teaching what you should, and that we're testing what's been taught? It's frustrating across the board.
That's the administrators at that school.
Right.
That's the assistant principal, the instructional coach, and then also the math coordinator should be coming in there. What you're talking about is a teacher problem, a teacher issue that we are going to solve very fast.
Yeah, and I hear you, but I bet it's probably, and I don't know, y'all probably know because I don't see all the scores. I see my child's score. I don't see everything that you're talking about. But that's an issue too, that it's gotten this far, and that we're so what's going to happen? You know what I mean? And it's
what should happen.
Like every time we do something new, I come to you that this happens, and so I know nothing's perfect in the first rollout, but you're dealing with children's futures and lives and school and taking advanced classes, and so it matters for their next step. So, we've gotten this far into, whether it's a teacher issue, an administrator issue, whatever, or a system issue.
So like last Friday, the coordinators, all the content coordinators, Dr. Gabriel, myself, sat in a room and we pulled up lesson plans, just arbitrarily picked up lesson plans, all grade levels, different schools. And we were looking for the components and the expectations from the district office, so we just periodically check. We will do the same thing for grades. We will sit down together as a group and we'll spot check grade books and things like that really stick out, Mike.
Right,
we will say, oh, wait a minute, this class has all A's. Or wait, this class has all F's. Or how did this happen? The highest grade is a C or a B. So that's what we do, periodic checks. And then we will ask the instructional coaches and admin team for, what do you need from us to help you support this? But initially, it does come from the school admin team. But we do spot check both grades and lesson plans.
And I would say that the data that we're talking about that's available now, these aren't graded in the sense that anything that would have been completed on any of these diagnostic assessments wouldn't be translated into a grade in the classroom. So these are strictly for determining where students are and what the needs are to make sure we're planning accordingly or giving them the appropriate interventions. So There may be assignments within IXL that the teacher is assigning them to do that could be translated into a grade, and we'd have to probably look a little bit closer. But the actual assessments themselves are purely for information, just like we would use any other standardized test that we're getting. It's as we talked about, it's another snapshot in the photo album for that year for that child. So
Sure.
good to know
And
that
it
that's
begs
an
the
issue.
question, I'm not trying to get off on it, it begs the question, why do we have, a particular teacher teaching a particular class? We've talked about this, I've
Sure.
talked about this at Glynn Academy before, I've talked about Brooks High. Why do we have people that aren't qualified teaching certain classes? So where's the disconnect there, y'all? We've got, the teachers have enough on them right now, we all know that, and y'all do too. Everybody has one, so, it matters more now than ever that we've got qualified people teaching our students, at whatever level. And, the kids, whether it's diagnostic or not, I don't think it was. I think it was a test, but it does. Kids don't take it that way.
Sure.
This is causing issues.
Yeah.
And I just hope we can get a handle on it. And see if it's widespread or if it's just isolated. I'd be curious to see if there's any kind of updates you can give us Tuesday night about, doing the spot checks and see how things are looking.
The particular incident you're talking about, I've been on for about 2 weeks,
Yes.
personally, superintendent. And we're going to handle that problem.
I understand. I trust that. I do. Again, it's October. When you have whether you have a new teacher at a kindergarten or 8th grade or 12th grade, where is the, if I were an instructional coach, I'd be in that classroom every day, just about or whatever. So I don't know what's going on there, but I trust that it's going to be handled and all that kind of stuff. I just want to make sure it's not happening more widespread too.
Right.
Anytime we do these online things, it always happens where, we're not always 100% lockstep with, with what the online system says, and then we go back to creating our own test, and some of the answers are wrong or whatever. So I don't know what the answer is, but I just want to kind of be curious to see how widespread that is, and if it's an anomaly or just something that's with the software or whatever else. Because do the teachers pick the questions? Is it a knowledge base they choose from? Or is this generated and they're supposed to be teaching the standards and there's a test that's pre-generated?
Yeah, what you're talking about is not what they're talking about.
Okay.
Yeah, you're talking about a unit test that 2 teachers wrote, one teacher on one team and another teacher on another team, collaboratively wrote the test.
Okay.
And they were supposed to be traveling at the same pace.
Gotcha. Okay.
I have a question about the diagnostics. So when you're looking at it, Ms. Lewis, you mentioned you have 21 students in Tier 2. Well, now that becomes your Tier 1. Are we seeing trends like that coming out of last year? That our children are lower scoring on these diagnostics than what we would typically see?
Well, I can't say overall that's what we're seeing. When you sit with one school and you look at 6th grade levels, it's time consuming. But we see some, definitely some behind, maybe a level or 2 behind. I won't say overall, but I do want to say this as well. We as a district, we probably began this, 2 or 3 years ago, and the virtual learning and the COVID has really helped us in the area of, we've been preaching from the district office that Tier 1 instruction may look different at every school, and just because the children you have a 75–80% of your children behind in your school, that is not an intervention problem. That is a Tier 1 problem. And now I think the principals and the instructional coaches, they're going, we get that now because of COVID. They'll have a chance to catch up, but that's the majority of your school building. So to answer your question, we see some, but I don't know necessarily if it's changed because all the data is not in yet. Okay. I can only spot check certain grade levels right now, but I don't know that data overall yet.
I would say that if you're just looking at the first snapshot, we saw bigger gaps in math, which Dr. Spence made the point when we were talking about the data. math is one of those things, if you spend a good bit of time away from it, it takes you a minute to go, I don't remember how to do that. And then the teacher shows you one time, you're like, oh yeah, I remember how to do that, So it's gonna be interesting to compare those first two. And like I said, the window just closed the first part of this week, so we're getting that data pool now to then compare those two and see what kind of growth we saw now that they've had a chance to be back in instruction to
Right.
see that. Fortunately, I think with reading being probably a more common activity people would have been doing during closure, we didn't see as big of a slide in that area. So that was a good thing.
Yeah. And I know, I mean, we have a system of when we're going to time the diagnostics
Yes.
during the year. I wonder if there's a point during the year when we're not seeing the progress, or we're still seeing children lower than what is expected, or we don't anticipate they'll catch up by the end of the school year. Are we going to put other measures in place that are
Yeah.
not conventional to what we typically
Yes.
use?
Yes.
Okay, just additional help in some way
Yes.
after
Well,
school?
we got to think outside the box
Yes.
Yeah,
to expedite that.
yeah, okay.
And I would say many of our principals are already on that wavelength. So that's been good conversation.
You mentioned in certain schools, certain classes, that if there's more tier 2 kids, that now they get bumped up to tier 1. In those kids that are tier 2 in maybe other schools, and now they're in tier 1 at a particular school, are those resources still available to help them?
Yes.
And they're still,
Yes.
you
You gotta
know,
keep in mind,
right.
we have standards.
Right.
So even if you are in tier 2, you're exposed to your grade level standards. And then if you're still further behind, then we'll give you the resources and you get a double dose.
right. So even if you're now put in tier 1,
That's right. We
it's
still
still
know who
same.
you are.
Right.
That's when I said we looked at children's trend data, because it's important to know that piece, because it's important to know that Hank's had trouble since 2nd grade, and now he's in 4th and 5th grade, so I know he's gonna need double doses. So you can't just look at that data isolated.
Even though I may be in tier 1.
That's exactly right.
Okay, yeah. All right, just wanted to make sure that.
And gifted. I mean, if you're
Yeah.
accelerated, we need to push you on as well.
Right.
That's what I thought you were gonna ask.
All right, any other questions for, thank you.
Wait, I got a freebie.
All right.
I'm on a virtual library challenge, so I've got a good many leaders in our community that stepped up and said, hey, I'll videotape reading a book because I want to push out the literacy to our schools. You might not be able to go in the classroom to read, but if you are willing to record yourself reading a book, I'd love for you to do that, because I know y'all are just dying to volunteer. So email me, let me know, and I'll get you all the details. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Dr. Whitehead's going to talk about our 2020 SAT scores.
So we do have the SAT scores that are available and have been up there. And, again, I think testimony to the work that has been done to prepare our students, even amidst all the challenges of administering the assessments during COVID and preparing our students to take the assessments. When you compare us to all the other public schools that have had students take the assessments, we fared well comparatively. We outpaced the state and the national scores in each of those areas that you see. So for the total score, that total composite, as well as the extended writing and the math. So math was similar for most areas, but overall we did well. If you look at the next slide, we actually maintained fairly close trends here for the brackets that our students fell into. And actually that top bracket, last year we had 2% of students in that top bracket, and this past year we had 3%. So the thing to keep in mind is that when students take the SAT and they take it multiple times, when we get this cohort report, it summarizes the most recent score that we have for students. So out of 404 students that were in that graduating class in Glynn County, this represents the scores for those 404 that took the assessment. When we go forward to look at the total mean compared to other districts in our RESA and the bar for the state, again, we trended similarly to last year. Last year, Effingham and Bryan were in reverse positions, but we were still within that top band with them for the total mean score. And then the next slide shows the total number of students who tested. And again, we were in a similar position to the numbers that tested. So we still had a large group of students that participated in SAT amidst all the challenges. So, and again, it could have been that took the test at any point in high school, but their most recent score summarized.
Any questions about SAT?
I just got one just for, I guess, personal information. In the grand scheme of things, when I'm applying for college, I think we increased our score 4 points. Is that significant for college? I mean, just, is 4 points something that can keep me from going to Georgia or, you see what I'm saying?
For some schools, yes.
Right.
And I think it's always important to know what the particular schools you're interested in, what they're looking for. Because if your time could be better applied to the type of testing format that would be on the ACT versus the SAT, and you need that score to be able to go to the college you're choosing, then I would focus on that part and make sure that, you know, you're keeping that. And then keeping in mind, this is a summary of the most recent score, but we have many students who continue to try to get that, you know, what they call a super score. So
Right.
they'll focus this time on math because they already have the reading or the writing score that they really want.
You can
and
still
the
combine
colleges
the two.
will take the highest of each content.
And I used to argue this all the time. It's the most recent score. So say I was trying to get my writing score up,
Yeah.
and I'd already scored 700 on math. I'm going to do the writing, and I'm just going to throw something on the math. So
Okay.
that's the score you see right there.
Right.
Okay.
So it's really not, I mean,
Yeah.
And
That's why I always point that out because you know it doesn't take the super score for this cohort report. Colleges will do that.
when did the 2020 cohort take the SAT, a majority of them? Would you
It
say?
doesn't give us their date tested, although I get files each time locally that students test. And our last big bulk of students had tested probably early spring last year. We had some that tested over the summer.
So
but,
basically right when the pandemic hit.
Mhm.
All right, so,
Well, SAT canceled their March
Right.
15th test, so it would have been the one prior to that.
Okay. so we're still trending upwards.
We are,
Yeah.
yes. And like I said, I think it's, you know, the data over time is showing, you know, that especially since the format of the test changed to really capture more about what students learn in high school versus some of the random things that it used to have on it when I took it, for example. It's actually more aligned now to what students study in high school. And so I think it's a pretty good indicator overall, but keeping in mind that when we look at the summary data, it could have the student who's just trying to get that super score and they're not really focusing on certain subjects.
And it also matters, Hank, with regard to Hope versus L. Miller, because you have to have a minimum ACT or SAT score to
Okay.
qualify, as well as the grade. So
that's right.
it could be that you're trying to get into a school that doesn't require as high of an SAT, but Zell Miller scholarship does require a minimum of 1,200, whatever it is. So it's kind of important for both, because if you're trying to get that Zell Miller or move from Hope to Zell, it kind of counts too.
Yes.
thank you, Dr. Whitehead.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we're going to talk about our policy review for the valedictorian salutatorian policy. It's really dealing with grade point average, and that the valedictorian salutatorian policy, that's how we choose that person. But if you look at number 7, can you make that a little bigger, please? All right. On July the 1st, House Bill 444 passed, and the state basically limited the number of dual enrollment courses that a student could take, and they limited it 30 hours. Now, there are 2 parts to that limitation. And the first part is if they have less than 18 hours, then they can get to 30. If they have more than 18 hours right now, then they get 12 additional hours. So those students with 28, 26 hours of college credit right now, they've got the advantage. But what they also said is since they're paying for only 30 hours, they're not going to pay for unlimited hours anymore at college, then we wanted to change our policy to be in line with that, so someone who has more money can't just buy a valedictorianship over someone who does not. And that's just the gist of it, is to make the playing field level. And so I'm asking that we change this policy so that Part B of how you get that extra weighted grade point is approved state-funded dual enrollment courses in English, math, social studies, science, and foreign language only, as per House Bill 444. And so that would be how you get that dual enrollment course, and we just follow that when we choose valedictorian this year and from then on.
So if a student basically takes a PE in college or whatever, they're not getting
Right, and
the
that's
extra
always
weighted.
been that case. It's always been that case.
Yeah.
It's always been, it had to be a core subject or a foreign language. The one thing that changed is now you can only take 30 hours. They're only going to count those 30 hours. So
Okay.
really what we're dealing with, the freshman and sophomore can't take classes at the college unless they pay for it.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you're willing to pay for your child to take classes at the college, then you can pay for it now. When we become a junior, then you can get 30 hours. Well, it's not fair for you to be paying for your child to take class at the college when Joey over here, whose parents can't afford,
Right.
and they're trying to both be valedictorian. That's all I'm saying,
So, all right.
in a nutshell. So
Just for clarification, did House Bill 444 limit the state-funded dual enrollment to juniors and seniors, or has it always been that?
it limited the state-funded dual enrollment to juniors and seniors and 30 hours.
As well as the
Yeah.
hours?
A couple of years ago, they opened it up to freshmen, and I don't know if I would send my freshmen to the college
Right.
campus, you know, I mean, that was the question then.
When I was at
They're
Brunswick
old enough
High
to go.
in 2018, there was a young lady that graduated with an associate's degree before she graduated from high school. Last year, they had a young lady graduate with a bachelor's degree before she graduated from high school because she just went to the college for 4 years.
Her name was Doogie Hauser.
But that's not possible anymore unless that parent's willing to pay for it as freshmen and sophomores, and then more than that.
I can't remember, how does GA Futures for Hope and Zell, how do they weigh on dual enrollment courses? I can't remember. Would that be a more fair way to use?
They don't-
Everybody has
they
to have
don't-
a GA Futures account. Could you use that number instead of, and let them weigh everything?
We're going to weigh the grade point average. Infinite Campus is going to weigh the grade point average because we have a number that's going to be, this is paid for by the state,
Right.
this is paid for by the parent, and I'm assuming that they're going to do the same thing when we plug it in,
Okay.
because it just kind of copies what's on Infinite Campus. So,
This
Anyway.
makes sense. This
It-
makes sense.
yeah, and it's just, to me, it's just fair. 'Cause I mean, I know there's some kids that can't have their parents pay for all those college courses. So, any other questions about, this is a policy revision that we're going to hope to bring about. So. All right. Mr. Boudreaux.
I got a question real quick before we jump.
Oh, no, I messed up. Go ahead.
What do we need to do, John, as far as if we need to table this, and I know it's gotta be tabled for 30 days, right, before we can vote? Do we table it during the, now, or do we table
What I
it?
was gonna do is, before Al came in, I was gonna say, wait a minute, so I wanted to talk to everybody and make sure that they're okay.
Yeah.
We don't have to table it at all. We can vote on it Tuesday night.
It's later on the agenda is where you can say. it's
Or we
not-
can table it today
Yeah.
and vote on it Tuesday. If anybody has any, grief with it or wants to talk more about it or has another issue, let us know. But we went through it and talked a lot about it, and it just makes sense to be just fair, give every student the opportunity to make it to the top without something else being an issue. So if nobody has any issues, I'd like to put it on the table tonight when we get down to it. Vote on it Tuesday.
Before Mr. Boudreaux goes, we're going to talk about EOC grading requirements. If you'll pull that up, I'm sorry, I overlooked that. So just taking you through a little history of the EOC, if you'll make that a little bigger, I'm getting old. All right, prior to 2014, the end of course test counted 15% of the students graded at high school. And then after the fall of 2014, it was that the wording went to at least 20%. Well, in Glynn County in 2016, we made that test count 30% of the students' grade weight. We just felt like the students would take it a little more serious. And so we used to have 8 courses that were tested. And you can see in math, we had Algebra 1, Geometry, English, 9th grade literature, and American literature. And then social studies had 2 and science had 2. Well, this July, along with House Bill 444, they also changed the end of course tests that are required. Now there's only 4. 9th grade literature, Algebra 1, Biology, and U.S. History. U.S. History is highlighted because if that student takes it at dual enrollment and also as an AP course, they don't have to take the end of course test, and so that wouldn't count as part of their grade. Okay, so the state can you roll down a little bit? There we go. All right, the State Board of Education meeting this past, in October, the state school superintendent proposed that we make it count 0.01% this year because he didn't think it was fair for those students to be tested and be behind. We got kids virtually, we started school late, we have less days, that kind of thing. The State Board of Education, they want to make it, they want to change it to 10%. So they have put that, like you're talking about, put it for a month and let everybody see it. So right now it looks like it's going to be 10%. They'll vote on it in November, and I'm saying that I want to make our EOC grade weight whatever the state says, the least that we can possibly do, at least for first semester. And it's not a policy, it is a regulation, but I just wanted to share that with you. That's what I would like to do.
Yeah, that makes sense, for sure.
Any questions about that? All right, Mr. Boudreau.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Let's get started with Glynn Academy Science Building. Tomorrow we have our final training that's part of our contract, and once we do that, we should be closing that project out really soon. The Physical Education Building, we received proposals yesterday on the 30 bid packages. The construction manager is in the process of putting that all together, and we should have a guaranteed maximum price for this meeting next month. So that's moving along pretty well. Altam Elementary School, we received a updated schedule showing us how they're going to get to the March 30 date on time. So we have a little tool to kind of help us look after that, and we will. So, but otherwise it looks like it's going to be just fine. Center for the Arts, nothing really new to report there unless, Dr. Spence, you want to mention anything?
We did meet with them on
Last week.
last week. Yeah. Still, we're moving along. We're making progress still.
East Block 4, I think it's getting ready to have some, well, you know more about that than I do right now, about the advertising and the...
Yeah, the chamber has really done a good job of putting together some advertisement, and they're going to, that should be coming out tonight. I think that I'm hearing from the chamber, and then there's going to be some other stuff. So the chamber's really done a good job of taking the lead on that and putting this stuff out.
If there are no further questions, I'll turn it over to Kevin Smith with the GOOD report.
Thank you, Al. Everybody should have a copy. If you don't, let me know. All right. Page 1, nice and easy. As we said, East Splash 2 projects are all complete. We're still a little bit of expecting some more receipts from the DOE. Now, as Al mentioned, you've got the auxiliary gym proposals all submitted. We'll move on to page 2. We've got Science Building and Edo are still in closeout phase. Next month, they'll be moved over to the completed project side as it relates to East Splash 3. Probably the real exciting news is that you kind of got a bank error in your favor as you look at the receipts here for last month. It was quite significantly more than our 1.7 budget, and it's, I would say, $1.35 million over, and that's made up of two components. Collections were $350,000 more than budgeted, and then the Department of Revenue did an audit for the last 4 years and came into $1 million on your favor. So that makes up the $1.35 million.
We've been asking for like the last, I don't know how long we had East Block. A long time.
Long time.
Where are all the collections? Where are all the past due stuff? I guess we know now.
Well, you just picked it up. It's like a Monopoly card. You got the big one. Okay. And so, of course, that puts you on a trend that gives you a nice little bump, way more than forecast. And that means funds collected are going to be able to do a lot more good work for an extended period of time. Any questions, ladies and gentlemen?
Thank you, sir.
All right.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
No, can I just make a comment on that? It's not your report, but we're talking about this newest East Loss that's going to be on the November ballot being capped at a dollar amount, correct?
Yes.
So if we continue to see trends like this, it's not capped for a period of time.
No.
And so we're just looking to raise funds for the projects that we have out there for a particular amount of money.
That is correct.
Just wanted to clarify that.
Next is Mr. McKenzie with the drug screening program. Just look at what we've done the last 2 years.
Good evening.
Information that you asked for the last time. We spoke about this a few meetings ago. You wanted to kind of get an idea, kind of get a beat on where we were with the drug screening for our last 2 years, or the time that we've been able to actually screen. For the 2018-2019 school year, we actually were able to do a screening for that entire school year. We started in September of 2018, and of course we tested through April of 2019. We tested a total of 301 students. These were random tests. And of the 301, we had 10 who tested non-negative. Non-negative test. And of course, for those 10, policy required that they be retested, and they were no longer random. They, of course, they paid for their own test. Any retests were paid for by the student, not for the system. And of those 10 retests, of course, they did not come back for any other non-negatives. Total cost to the system in 2018-2019 was $11,422. For the 2019-2020 school term, we started testing in August of 2019, and of course our last testing date was February of 2020. We had a scheduled testing of March, but we were not able to do so for obvious reasons. We were out of school. We tested during that period of time 255 students, of which we had 11 non-negatives, and out of those 11, we only retested 9 because 2 were scheduled to be tested on March 17th, and of course we were not back in school. Total cost to the district, of course, during this period was $6,420, bringing us to a total of $17,842 for the testing periods in question. I'll entertain any questions.
So, okay, let me see if I can ask this the right way. So our non-negative tests, we're trending upwards percentage-wise because we tested fewer students. We did test the whole year last year, right? So
No, we only tested between,
so we tested 255 and had 11 non-negatives, and the year before we tested 301 and had 10 non-negatives.
yeah. No, we did start a month later.
Sure.
On the 1st, but we were able to test earlier, starting in August, and we ended in February.
Okay.
Any questions about our drug screening program?
Is there anything that we have that's going to help us say that that's a useful $17,000 being spent towards deterring kids to
If there are
with a
significant,
non-negative, since that's the
other than the deterrent factor, Mr. Medalla, if there are significant enough retests that are also non-negative, which is something we didn't have, which was very good. The retests usually were not non-negative tests, but according to the policy, the real teeth of the policy don't really kick in until the 3rd violation, and at that point, then a student can lose up to a year's eligibility in whatever activity that they have, privileged activity they have. Prior to that, it's basically counseling, and maybe they miss a practice or they miss a certain amount of play. But so it really, the real deterrence is if there are significant retests that in fact continue to be non-negative. and of course the idea that they are, and they could be randomly tested at any time. We were trying to run the tests, at least one set of tests per month, and we would use a randomizer to do it, so it would be based only, according to the policy, it's based only on a student's ID number, so we don't know anything about the student at all. And then we would stagger it based on school, the months and so forth, but usually it ended up being about once a month.
It looks like to me that it's going to take a few years to be able to use these numbers to be able to see what is significant or not. You know, first year looked like 1 in 30 kids tested had a non-negative. This past year looks like 1 in 25. Is that significant? You know, 1 to 2 years, it looks like it may be, but hey, next year are we going to have 1 to 50, or are we going to have 1 to 10? So, you know, I think we just continue to keep doing what we're doing and just monitoring the numbers.
Maybe I'm misinterpreting what you're saying or the graph here. It looks to me like everybody that had to retest came back with a non-negative. Like
Initially,
basically,
yes,
they
because
didn't
only
make
because
any change.
right, yeah, exactly, because for the purposes of this report, which we're dealing with cost, the retests had no effect on cost because all retests are at the cost of the student.
Right.
In this case, the retests did come back also. They did not come back with another non-negative. Now, it could have, but it didn't.
Oh, they did not?
No, it did not.
Okay.
Because otherwise that would have went to the third.
They would have gone to a second test or to a third test.
So nobody went to that. Okay, I thought the grids were showing us on the retest how many non-negatives, which made it look like
No, the retest basically said we
failed again.
Yeah, we retested everyone that was tested,
Okay.
but that could change as well.
Any more questions for Mr. McKenzie? Thank you so much, sir.
All right, good deal. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Do you want to talk about the policy now, Mr. Madala, or you want?
Yeah, just for a second. Does anybody have any, can we put it on the table?
Under these circumstances, yes, because
Thought so.
unless there's somebody that vehemently objects.
Anybody
If you all
object?
agree, it could be voted on Tuesday. You're laying it on the table today. You can come within the month unless there's an objection.
I know you did, but I just feel like I need to ask the question. But you know, a lot of times when we make these decisions, it looks completely reasonable, but you know, 2 months down the road, we get to graduation time, and the senior counselors start looking at it like, oh God, we forgot. You know, there was something else happened, but they've all cleared it. Senior counselors, everybody that's really, you know, involved in getting the kid to graduate, you know, and involved in those seniors' lives. Do they sign off on it too? You know,
Both principals and both registrars pushed this to me.
Okay.
And I didn't, and to be quite honest, I didn't even think about it when I read the law, but they both pushed it to me about a month ago, and we've been looking at it and saying, I've been calling other superintendents. I know that one superintendent's doing nothing, they're just gonna do it.
Right.
But I think in a town like ours, where we have folks that can pay for 50 or 60 hours of credit, I think we really need to think about being fair. But yes, the counselors, the registrars and the high school principals, all 4 of them want to do this.
Okay.
Is this a time-sensitive issue?
We certainly, if we don't do it to Tuesday, we certainly need to do it soon.
All right,
Because
I mean,
the longer that the kids have to sign up for second semester, it's gonna impact us then.
okay, all right.
And then those kids could sign up and then say, well, I've already done this.
They're paying for 'em, yeah.
Paying for it, so.
Yeah, normally we
We
don't
thought the
rush.
sooner the better just because of the start of
We've
school.
got freshmen paying for college right this second.
My point is, normally we don't rush a policy through unless it's time-sensitive.
The circumstances allow it.
Yeah, right, exactly, but
It was, from reviewing it, it's time sensitive because of the next semester.
all right,
And
sounds
let them
good.
know before they're building their case for their valedictorian.
I don't have a issue with it.
But at the same, play devil's advocate, it is sort of like changing the rules midstream a little bit. So, it's almost like holding you accountable for your evaluation before you know what the rules are.
Right,
So,
but they-
I mean, the only other thing I would say is that the only thing you could do is delay it until next year, so we're gonna start clean. But I mean, if you've got ninth graders already doing it, you've got 3 years to kind of get everybody out of the system and get them through it, I guess. So I don't guess there's a good time to really do it.
We probably should have done it in July,
Yeah, right.
is what we
So
probably
people
should
know
have
what the
done.
rules are going in.
Right,
And so, yeah, you might have parents say, well, I'm paying for,
right.
because of this, to build it up.
And, yep, and like I said, we probably should have been thinking about this in March, April, May, June, knowing that it was coming.
Well, we had, other things
And we have some other things to be
to
doing.
think about.
Well, for me, I look at it like this calculation is specific to Glynn County. When you send your transcript to a college, they're going to totally rework your GPA and all of that, and it's just merely for, I guess, rank here in Glynn County.
Guys, let me make sure you understand this. This is not going to just be something that just goes and we put it in our book and nobody says. Somebody's going to say something, because there are people right now thinking about how they can be valedictorian in their second month of high school. So I mean, this is not going to be just go away. It's somebody's going to say something. So, okay.
I'm fine with tabling it, or not tabling it, I'm fine with just putting it out.
Putting
there.
it on the table.
Yeah, put it on the table.
Same thing but different.
Yeah.
Anybody? If it's okay with everybody, we'll put it on the table. Vote on it Tuesday. Thank you.
Ms. Preston.
I don't know if anybody had a chance to look at the June financial report, but we saved a lot of money. I'm just going to skip through we did several budget amendments to the general fund, most of them grant related. But I'll skip through to the actual financial report. So our budgeted revenues were 137.6, and we received 141. The majority of that obviously is property tax. We received 4.1 million over what we had budgeted. In 2020, we used a 98% collection rate, and the collection rate actually came in at 99.2. So that accounts for most of the increase. As well as public utilities increased, and the TAVT was $1 million over what it had been tracking. So people are buying cars. Our savings, our budgeted expenditures for the general fund were $140.2 million, and we only spent $134.5 roughly, so we saved about $6 million in budgeted expenditures. And the main category obviously was instruction, 3.2 million of that, and out of that 2.3 in salaries and benefits. So when we had vacant positions, they didn't get filled.
Right.
We didn't do after school stuff. You didn't have athletics and people doing the fields and no overtime, and it just added up significantly. On top of that, instructional supplies was underspent by almost $750,000. So then the next biggest category was maintenance and operation, and they saved 1.2 million, and $500,000 of that was salaries and benefits, positions unfilled, of course, and supplies for repairing things and utilities. We saved a bunch of them. No water, no electricity, no gas. Then the other big category, of course, was transportation, and they saved a little over $500,000. So, in summary, our budget deficit was supposed to take us down to $11.8 million fund balance, and instead, we will start this year with a $21.2 million fund balance.
Shazam.
Yeah.
Good job.
Merry Christmas.
Pandemic.
So,
The number.
yes,
Back to the number.
very good number. Is there any questions? No.
Were there any
That's
cutbacks?
amazing.
Yeah, that we had. Everybody got paid still.
Everybody got full
Everybody
salaries.
that some of this money could go back to something that we had cut for, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But it doesn't seem like we owe anything back to,
No, everybody got their full salary, and
Yeah.
then the ones that were doing additional jobs, like athletics, ticket takers and things like that, we filed unemployment for that on
Right.
their behalf, and they got that too.
that's great.
So, you know, we had positions that didn't get filled, that saved a lot of money, and just, you know, just, it all added up. I mean, when I looked at it in detail, I mean, you save money on long distance, calling, and travel for teachers that go from school to school to school, or administrators, or whatever. You know, of course, fuel, electricity, registration fees, we're not going out of town anywhere, dues and fees, and it was just amazing.
Great job.
Jerry didn't get the presidential suite at the Westin in June.
And you know, but we collected taxes practically before COVID hit. So we got all of our revenues, and then we saved a bunch of money for 2.5, 3 months, so.
So we're in better shape to deal with what this year might look like than we had
Absolutely.
budgeted.
Well, Trump came through with the CARES Act money, so, yeah, I mean, it's just phenomenal. And then, of course, our sales tax receipts, you've been listening to that, and they did this audit that was actually a 5-year audit, 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19, and we picked up about $1 million in an audit adjustment for that for the month of September. But even during the summer, we ended up from last fiscal year, 2018-19 fiscal year receipts to 2019-20 fiscal year receipts in East West, we were only less by 0.21%. So we, even through COVID, we collected what we needed to practically be where we were last year. And last year, from fiscal year 18 to 19, our East West increased by 9%. So.
People, you know, people spent their stimulus checks. We really kind of thought that maybe, you know, we'd take a hit, and
Yeah.
People took that money and did home improvements and
Well, that and
bought, you know,
Governor
whatever.
opened us up. I mean,
Right.
my son worked the beach again this year, Barry's Beach Service, and he said it was the busiest summer he has ever had at Barry's Beach Service. The beach was packed. all
So I've kind of mentioned this to y'all, or to Dr. Spence and Andrea, just kind of offline a little bit, but I'm interested in your thoughts on, you know, I don't want to go back to the times where, you know, when I first on the board and we had all this extra money to spend and we were trying to figure out how to spend it every year and how much to give back and everything else. But I do think our teachers, support staff, administrators, I think everybody has done a very good job. And granted, we were able to pay everybody through the pandemic. I think that's a benefit a lot of people didn't have, you know, so I do appreciate that we were able to do that. But I would be strongly in favor of, even if it's symbolic, some type of one-time incentive, whatever you want to call it. Stipend, bonus, you know, whatever. We've done it a few times in the past. I know it's expensive, but I thought a lot about it. I think that, especially for the people we're asking, the teachers we're asking to, you know, that thought they were going to have to do virtual or in-person instruction, and they're doing, you know, 2 or 3 different types of instruction, you know, for the teachers that have 6 to 10 more kids in the class than they may have on another team. I think that I don't think you can single anybody out. We'd have to do it across the board, and I don't really have the answer, although I could look back and see what we've done before, but I know that y'all know that as well. But I would be interested in your ideas about some type of incentive, one-time bump like we've done in the past.
Seems like we always did it around Christmas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that might be something we certainly can consider, but I do want to,
We split the tax year 1 year.
Right.
It was
I didn't
a
remember. Right.
larger incentive.
and I'm all for that. I don't think the hard times have hit yet financially, and I think they're coming. And so I want to make sure we're safe, and maybe I'm a little too safe sometimes. But yes, I'm all for that, and I think that's something we can do. But I want to let you guys know that I think the hard times are going to come in March and April and May. Not from the COVID, but from the backlashes of what's coming after that.
It'll be interesting to see if we have a 99%
And
collection.
so I think we need to be
What?
ready for that.
It'll be interesting to see if we have a 99% collection rate.
Right, no, I
That's-
agree with
yeah,
that,
that's what
yeah,
I'm
sure,
thinking.
sure.
But I do agree with you on the stipend for our staff and our teachers, because they have worked very hard.
But we just talked about our, you know, our fund balance growing
Yeah.
$10 million, right? I mean, in
Yes,
essence,
21.
overnight, you know, we thought it was gonna be $10 million
We
less.
spent $10 million overnight.
I understand. So, but I'm not
So
saying,
it's a
I'm not
wash.
saying, well, I'm not saying spend another 10, John, but,
We picked up 6.5 million last year.
I feel like even doing an incentive would cover, unless it's some type of just crazy. But y'all, I mean, you know, a lot of us are in the business. Jerry, you slowed down? I mean, people are building houses. I mean,
I've slowed down.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Jerry,
Everybody's going to the movies.
that's not everybody. I'd go. They won't let us. So definitely there's some, you know, some institutions have struggled and continue to, but again, with, you know, the stipends that people got during this time and unemployment rate where it is, I think that, and Chapman, I mean, he's staying on top of it. You got, you know, not just this year, but he's stayed on top of it. And I don't have any reason to believe he won't continue to do that, you know, for us and for the county and for,
Our collection rate definitely has been better since he
I
took
mean,
office.
it's, you know, Dr. I don't disagree with you. We might have something come up that we don't anticipate, but I still think it would be a gesture,
I agree with you,
you know,
100%.
sooner rather than later. And I don't know if you can come up with something by Tuesday night, but maybe
I think we can come up with something by November, though.
by next meeting or whatever, you know, a plan for what we do
Right.
and for whom. Thank you.
You've got the bids.
Yep, so the next thing is Title I purchase of Promethean boards at Satilla Marsh. There were 2 bidders on that, and the lowest bidder is STS Education. The original bid was done for 8 of them, but they came in at such a low price that they were able to get 9 out of the budget that she had. So the total price for 9 Promethean panels is $33,432 to STS Education. And then same for Burris Millette, a Title I purchase of Chromebooks, and the lowest bidder was CDW, which is not surprised, they just won the bid for the big lease rollout we did. And they're doing 120 of them at $37,364.40, the CDWG vendor. Then the last thing I have is this year we were allocated from the state $77,220 for a bus, so we want to make sure we don't lose that money and buy are we buying a special ed bus?
Right there.
Huh? 72 passengers, is that special ed?
No.
Okay. Anyway, a 72 passenger bus, so the total cost of the bus is $121,999, and we'll get $77,220 from the state on that. And the difference will come out of our local capital projects fund, which as of right now has a $1.3 million fund balance.
I was just about to
That's
ask
the
you that
money that
question
we've
and
put
see if we.
aside over the years.
Yeah,
Huh?
I was just about to ask you that question to see what, because I know that was.
That was the money that, you know, when we kept coming
Right,
out
kept
better
adding
at
to
the
it,
end of the
right.
year, we would put it to the local capital projects fund. That's on the financial report, Fund 30 capital projects, and their fund balance starting this year is $1.312499. So we could definitely afford to get it, and I think we should.
Any questions?
And I guess we have to, I wouldn't be opposed to moving money over, you know, to start trying to build that account back up when it's time. But I guess it doesn't really matter. It can be the fund balance or that balance. We can always move it back and forth, right?
Yeah.
If you need to.
We'll see how much stipends cost.
Sorry.
I don't want to have to borrow money internally anymore.
Well, it shouldn't cost as much. You didn't hire as many teachers back. You have fewer positions, so it shouldn't cost as much as it costs in the past. So we can do more, right?
Next year, our enrollment is down.
Right, no, I know, that's gonna
We
hurt,
will
yeah.
be losing positions next year. Our enrollment's down.
By attrition, by attrition.
Yeah, through attrition.
Right, no, I understand.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you,
All right.
Ms. Preston.
Ms. Preston.
I do have one other question. You said you tabled the policy, so we're tabling until,
Tuesday. We
Until
can vote
Tuesday.
on it Tuesday.
okay. You got that, Ms. Britt? That's all I have.
The action items. Alrighty, good deal. All right, any other before you move, any executive session stuff, any land, legal, or personnel out there? Which one?
Legal,
Legal?
land, personnel.
All of it? All right. I'll entertain a motion to go into executive session for land, legal, and personnel.
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Sam, can I get a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Holsey, all those in favor? Motion passes 6-0 with Ms. Bobbitt out at 5:51. You already hammered out. If I'm gonna lose a I don't know what